Hello, friends. Welcome to Torah Saturday. This week, we are going to spend some time exploring the Holiness Code from Parshat Kedoshim, which means holiness. And there's two interesting aspects of it. I've put way too many things on the source sheet, but we'll get to what we can get to. Right now, let's start with the blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. First, let me put I think I have the link. Let me put the link for the source sheet in the chat here. Those of you who want to peek ahead. Yeah, so I call it the spiritual and ethical implications of holiness.
Just a little topic.
Yeah, you know, nothing big. Uh, I started with like a little preview from the end of the previous Parsha, which was Achrei Mot, and this week is actually a double portion. Um, and there's all kinds of forbidden sexual relations that it goes through here. And it says, and in general, don't do any of these abhorrent practices that were carried on by the Canaanites, and you will not defile yourselves for them. I am the eternal your God, Ani Adonai Elohim. So this is kind of a little bit of a mantra that we're going to see. It's almost like a proof point, which is kind of added to a lot of these. And I didn't share any commentary on this, but it's an interesting rhetorical device. I'm curious if people have thoughts about that, or what is that kind of, because I know I've in the past and a little bit today too, just find it a little bit confusing. It's like, what's that all about? So does anybody have a take on that or a reaction?
One thought is that we're being told we've reached a turning point or an inflection point in our civilization and in our religious practice,
Hmm.
and to draw a line of separation.
Hmm. Yeah. Holiness, one of the translations is does mean separation, and it's like, don't be like these people. Yeah, so I like that, Neil. Thank you.
I also, because it's followed by sexual relations, I've heard that the Canaanites were known to have had a sex cult or some kind of religious practice that involved sexuality and perhaps um, temple prostitutes.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I think that is correct, and that's a really good tie-in. It wasn't only about sex, it was about idolatry, and that these sexual practices were associated with idolatry. So thank you. Okay, so oh yes, Enid.
Um, to me, I read into it that it's important who you keep company with.
Mm,
So if they're asking you not to follow the Canaanite way, to
mhm.
bring it up to current day, um, yeah, it requires some uh, what's discernment
Hmm.
because sometimes negativity, for lack of a better word, can seep in and affect who you are or affect your judgment, affect your actions.
For sure. And that reminds me of like people in 12-step programs. It's like sometimes you have to stop hanging out with certain people who are still using if you're trying to change your behavior. Um, And even in more everyday circumstances, that applies too.
And the converse. It's like if you play tennis, I don't play tennis anymore, but I remember in my younger days, I would want to play tennis with somebody who was a little bit better than I am, rather than I was a little bit better than. I don't want to go into just the idea, the connection, the to elevate yourself and the role model to elevate rather than to be dragged down.
Thank you. Good point. All right, so now we get into Kedoshim, into holiness, and some would argue this is one of the most important lines in Torah. And depending on what I'm reading, I would agree with that since I'm reading this today. But it's also one of the most enigmatic. Um, so would somebody like to read the English of Leviticus 19:2? Hey Dan, hey Anita, welcome.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
I can read it.
Sure.
Speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the eternal, your God, am holy.
Thank you. Few interesting grammatical points. Future tense. You shall be holy. For I, the eternal, your God, am holy. So we see the same formula we're just talking about. Ani, Adonai, Elohim. I, Yud He Vav He, am your God. But then we also say Kadosh, holy. You may remember from our Amidah prayer, for those of you who go to services, Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. So this is kind of a big statement. The divine is holy, we shall be holy. What's going on here? Interesting also, this is not a mitzvah. This is not counted among the 613 commandments. What does it mean to be holy? Yeah, Enid.
Oh, all right. I was gonna.
Well, whatever you were gonna say, yeah.
Okay. The idea of the shall be holy, it speaks to me of a process.
Mhm.
So here is God, and God is holy. He says he's holy. I am holy. For I, the eternal your God, am holy. And so that's the diving board, that's the jumping off point. So,
Mhm.
and we can always renew every day. It's always a forward motion. So
Mhm.
it's an intention, it's a kavanah, and
Mhm.
I shall be holy can be in the next second.
Mhm.
I think it's a very positive, hopeful, encouraging way to think, because, and it's not the topic for today, maybe, but what is holy and how big is holy and what are all the implications of holy? So I think that, yeah, God's holy and I can continue on my journey to be holy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I see some nods. Anita.
Um, the commentary I have here talks about how to be holy is to rise to partake in some measure of the special qualities of God. When a morally free human being has the complete dominion over one's own energies and inclinations and temptations associated with them and places them at the surface of God's will, those 613 mitzvot are strategies for accomplishing this.
Mm.
But this is the overall goal of holiness, according to one interpretation.
I'm curious. Thank you, Anita. That's a really interesting and helpful interpretation. I'm curious what commentary book you're using, and is there a commentator?
Same one.
It's Haim. Okay. And who was it that did they attribute that to anyone?
Oh gosh. Let's see, the parasha, number.
If
Okay.
it's not readily
It's
available, that's okay.
well, it's on here somewhere. I just don't, it's no.
Okay.
I'm not seeing a reference. They
Okay.
did a lot in this one, that's annoying.
It's a very
Okay,
good summary. And
let
what
me
I'm
see what this
hearing
book
kind of from
says.
what both of you were saying, where it's holiness is maybe an aspiration and the
I
means
like the term that was
of,
used by Enid, but saying a journey.
yeah, yeah. And, there are different strategies to get there. Maybe it's the mitzvot, maybe it's other things. And so this whole section is known as the Holiness Code. For those who analyze the Torah by different authors, this author is known as H for the Holiness Code. It doesn't seem to match. Some people think it's part of the priestly writings, but it's distinct. It's distinct in character, and it's pretty interesting. Okay, let's say what Rashi has to say. We have a reader for this.
All right, I'll do it.
Okay, great.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't read Hebrew.
Oh, we don't, not just in English.
Okay. Rashi on Leviticus 19:2:2. Ye shall be holy. This means keep aloof from the forbidden sexual relations just mentioned and from sinful thoughts. It is evident that this is the meaning of, I'm assuming, you shall be holy,
Yes.
because wherever you find in the Torah a command to fence yourself in against such relations, you also find mention of holiness. Examples are Leviticus 21:7, they shall not take a wife that is a harlot or a profane, etc. And in the next verse, for I, the Lord who sanctify you, am holy. Leviticus 21:15.
Great, thank you. So he's going back to some of these sexual relations that we sort of touched on, but what interested me, what does it mean to kind of place a fence around yourself against these relations? Or sometimes the rabbis use the phrase keep a fence around the Torah. But starting here, what does it mean to keep a fence around yourself?
The one thing that jumps out at me is it's not just evil actions that are prohibited.
Yeah.
It's trying to remove the evil thoughts. So there's a offense of, it's not don't do it, don't even think about doing it. Trying to purify yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a little different than the old, thing they used to tell us teenage boys, keep it in your pants. It's a little beyond that. It is don't even think about it. And in some Orthodox communities, the most Haredi communities, the teenage boys are told, don't even look at girls.
Right.
And you'll see these guys with the wrong prescription glasses, or they'll walk around with their heads down, which is sort of, I think, part of this idea around the fence. Yes, Anita.
One commentary I'm seeing is that some people have interpreted that as an injunction to keep ourselves separate
Uh-huh.
from those things which may be temptation, physically
Yeah,
separating us from other peoples.
right. So it could be other peoples, like we saw earlier, like don't, be separate from the Canaanites, don't engage in their practices. The idea, I know some of you know what a mohitza is. It's a division between the men and women section in a traditionally Orthodox um, synagogue, and it is explicitly to keep the guys from being, sexually tempted by the women, and just focus on your praying, and don't look at, look at women, which could get you into sinful thoughts, which could lead to sinful actions. Martin.
Yeah, their idea of the fence is to remind yourself to be aware of one's own moral compass.
Hmm. That could be another way to kind of keep a fence. It's sort of like don't put yourself in a situation where trouble could arise. Again,
So
like
in general, just take extra precautions by whatever means necessary to accomplish that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Enid.
Well, if you think about food, um, you want to be careful what you put into your mouth for the well-being of your body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it feels like a very purity-orientated concept. And in psychological terms, I might think of it as boundaries
Mm-hmm.
or the duality between being out there and at the same time being contained, i.e., Rabbi David Jaffe,
Mm-hmm.
rather than fusing or merging with the other. There's
Mm-hmm.
a certain self-respect. And what just came to my mind is that scribes, when they're writing the Torah, I think I may be wrong, but as I recall it, they take a bath or they cleanse themselves before they write the words in the Torah. And I think that too is an ongoing process
Mm-hmm.
in many ways within our souls, within our houses, wherever, our clothes. So the fence is, to me, and then how high a fence? Or can the fence move up and down
Yeah.
depending upon your need?
I mean, I guess related to that, what I'm thinking about is, can you take this to, or you can take this to such an extreme um, extent where you're not engaging with the world at all in order to avoid the possibility of breaking a rule.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's, the core of Judaism to, to go and live in as a hermit in a cave.
Mm.
I think every time we take something too far, we really are separating ourselves from the whole point, from God's will for us. I apologize for being late. I didn't realize my computer was updating itself. Um, uh, but I don't know if you mentioned on the intro that, this following the death of Aaron's sons, that keeping a fence around the Torah sometimes can be maybe interpreted in the light of expanding the distancing of the sanctified area from people who might make further mistakes and further uh, violate the conditions of the Torah and the sanctuary. That this was done as a to protect the Torah from inadvertent violation. So I thought that was, building on what we were talking about last time, I thought that was significant.
No, thank you, Anita. And that's really interesting, especially in light of what Allison said. Because, right, it starts with, we have Aaron's sons and the Achrei Mot, the prior Torah portion, it says, tell people don't get too close, or tell Aaron don't get too close because he might die. That is, in a sense, putting a fence around. And just philosophically or theologically or spiritually, what is the consequence of violating a Torah prohibition? If it's something that you could die, if it's something that you could lose the life in the world to come, if it's this horrible, worst possible thing, then yeah, maybe you need to build fences around it. My philosophy is, most of the time, if you if you do something wrong, it's not like that big a deal to the divine. Now, some things are obviously worse than others, but something like not eating rice on Passover for Ashkenazi Jews, that is offense. Well, the rice grain, you might mistake a wheat grain for a rice grain. Therefore, we're going to prohibit rice because the penalty for eating, we just can't take a chance that we could make a mistake. So we're going to eliminate, rice completely. We're not going to allow peanut butter sandwiches in school because someone might be allergic and could get deadly sick. So you could debate, is that appropriate? Is that not appropriate? But that's this whole fence um, concept. And I think it is a pretty big deal in the Orthodox world. And people from the outside have described as you build a fence, and then another rabbi builds another fence, and another rabbi builds another fence. And all of a sudden, we got a lot of fences there. So let's go a
There
little
were
bit.
certainly a lot of offenses in my grandfather's home.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Kind of off-putting in a way.
I'll just add, like I agree that the whole fence concept can be too much, and I think especially in Rabbinic Judaism, but I certainly believe in the concept of slippery slopes.
yeah, that's right. If you're married and you're at the corporate sales party and you're flirting with all the young single women, that's a road that could really ruin your life. You know, that is not so well said, Dan. Enid, you could unmute, please.
I just think that there's a continuum,
Mhm.
and the continuum is from way over here to way over here. And I think for each one of us, at any minute or any hour or any day or any year of our life, it flows around. And because you can have too many fences, you can have not, that's where Dan was, you can have not enough fences.
Mhm.
And what are the fences that are important for you
Mhm.
as compared to the next person? And how do you interpret those as compared to how somebody else interprets them? So I think we have to keep in mind also, we don't have to. I think I have to keep in mind also what fences work for me,
Mhm.
who may not work for somebody else. And I respect their fences that work for them. As long as it's not the fence between my neighbor and I, because she doesn't want to fix it. Really, now. No, and being serious.
Yeah. So we'll bring this. I think that's a great um, comment to end this first section. So maybe one element of holiness is around boundaries and fences. As Enid said, we need to pick for ourselves what our right fence is, and we would do well to be respectful of other people's fences. Okay. So here's element number 2. One who eats a sacrifice of well-being on the third, that should be third day. So it says you can't eat it on the third day, shall bear the guilt for having profaned what is sacred to God. That person shall be cut off from kin. So what in the world is this talking about? It is from the time of the temple, from the time of sacrifices. You would make certain kinds of sacrifices, and then you would barbecue or boil the meat, and then it had to be eaten. So for this third one, the priests needed to eat it within 3 days. So it's profane what is sacred to God, and they should be cut off from kin. So, um, so Ibn Ezra, or Shizkuni, he's saying uh, this kind of meat has a certain holy character, a certain sacredness to it. Okay. Still not quite sure what that means. So let's read, maybe someone can read like the Or Chaim. And this section I call kind of the almost spiritual or mystical implications of holiness.
I can read.
Thanks, Allison.
The parts of the animal offered on the altar have enjoyed a higher status than any other animal, dead or alive. Seeing the
Okay, so
remains.
let's just pause here. So what does that mean? Let's see what this is talking about.
Saying it's an honor.
Yeah. Wow, you cow, you goat have been chosen to be offered to God. Nice. Good job, Okay. Please continue, Allison.
Um, Seeing the remains of the animal have been considered fit to be offered up in holy precincts, an area that most Israelites are not allowed to enter, dead or alive. As soon as the time allocated for these parts to be eaten has elapsed, the animal forfeits all the holiness it possessed, and this is replaced in turn by spiritually negative forces, just as in the case of a Jew who has died.
Right. So that last part, there's a teaching that if you're a priest, you cannot touch a Jewish dead body because that would kind of spoil your spiritual, you would no longer be spiritually eligible to kind of go in the temple. You would need to undergo a cleansing ritual. So here, what's this saying then? What does it mean? What happens when we eat the body on the third day, or the animal on the third day?
One thing I can't help but bring up is there's a certain practicality that meat that's been sitting around for more than a couple days, chances are you might get sick. And I have no idea how that plays into this. So there was probably a real sanitary health concern creeping into this.
And they, um, those who are writing this perhaps observed that and said, well, this is the reason.
Yeah,
Whereas,
we don't have the germ theory of disease. It's obviously cursed. It's got negative juju associated with it. Dan, I saw your hand for a moment there. Is there something you want to add?
No, I was just gonna say what Neil said, and I think we see that a
Okay.
lot in the Tanakh. So
Mhm.
where we didn't quite understand why we were doing something, but it was very important. Like
Mhm.
you know, letting the land rest and crops and yeah, not eating old meat. And I could even see a reason why they would want to have avoided pork for a long time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
and then there's this other inclination of the commentators want to say it's not just for these practical reasons, it's also because of God.
Yeah,
Yeah, or they didn't know. They didn't know the practical reasons, right?
Right.
Maybe.
But I mean, over time, there's a tendency to say, oh, it's just because of practical reasons, and then other people say, no, there's a holy reason as well, a divine reason.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in my conservative Tanakhas, there's this recurring theme of a lot of the instructions or laws um, uh, linked to that separateness, not necessarily for any other reason than keep making us different,
Mhm.
giving us rules to adhere by, so that we are worthy to be the ones that are chosen to carry the word of God. And so, while some may have, they are saying, while some of these, I think it's building on what y'all are saying. Some of these charges seem to have um, rationale behind them that we can place on it today, looking backwards. They challenge that idea that they're all that way. And I not really noticed that before we started talking about fences.
Hmm. Thank you, Anita. That's a good segue to kind of the next issue. What's the penalty for this? That person shall be cut off from kin. Martin.
Oh, speaking on Dan's comment about for the invalid pork consumption, is that because again there might be people who are getting sick from trichinosis? Is that why pork might have been deleted from the allowable foods?
I was just using that kind of as an example, but I mean, because when we're given the animals that we can eat, we're
Hmm.
kind of given biological, identifiers of an animal we can eat. So I'm not sure that did have much to do with it, but I'm sure
Oh,
it stopped them from getting sick.
yeah. Okay. I was just wondering if pork is still a valid reason if that's still Yeah,
I know
pork is
growing
still,
up, we were given this explanation. It was because of trichinosis, but there also is no archaeological evidence that there was trichinosis in the ancient Near East at that time.
so is that still a valid prohibition today? That'd be my question.
Yeah.
Certain parts of the
Well,
world, yeah.
I mean, I think
Especially
it is.
Asia.
I am not one to say things were prohibited because of public health reasons.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
there's a lot of things, but I don't. I mean, this is me personally. It's like it could have been a spiritual reason, it could be a cultural reason, it could be for whatever. But I don't keep kosher. I eat pork, but it's not because I think there's no health reason not to do it. It's just I don't choose to follow those practices. I don't find them meaningful for me. I know other people find them extremely meaningful to kind of keep kosher. And I very much respect that and honor that for people who do. Ina,
Um, am I muted?
you are not.
Okay. Um, well, I think we can, for me, I can incorporate a more holistic view. And I don't feel like it has, I feel like there are overlays and maybe it's all of it. Because one of the words we use all the time, I use the word sholem, some people use the other word, the root of sholem, but maybe we don't need to put it in containers so specifically. And I do think, as I've studied Torah for a long time now, that there are these parallels between things like animals or sacrifices or things that don't feel relevant today and contemporary reflections on our bodies, our health, our morality. And it leads me to think that mankind, in its sensitive way, um, maybe they have to go find a reason to explain it some way.
Mm,
And I just was listening to the American Indian, a brief podcast. And what struck me was I could have been sitting in some class at Temple.
mm. Yeah, I mean, that's why we
So
turn to.
if you get to the spiritual aspect of this, and if you believe that your receptacle for messages from above or spirit or however way you want to choose to believe it, then it's all just one, whether it's the animals, whether it's the fences, whether it's separating the communities, whether it's health, it's all of it.
Thank you, Enid. Let's now, speaking of separating from the communities, so you get exiled from your community 2000 years ago. That isn't quite a death sentence, but your chance of survival as an individual, as opposed to surviving in community, goes way, way down. So this is a big deal. And even today, if someone's family ostracizes them, it is emotionally devastating. So this is a big deal. So what is it talking about here? So someone please read what they have to say in the Women's Torah commentary.
I can read it. That person shall be cut off from his kin. This formulaic expression, which appears frequently in the Torah, probably indicates that the offender will suffer an untimely death, not excommunication.
Okay, so you've brought some bad karma on yourself.
And I remember that this is in association with the laws of Passover, that because I have eaten comets during Passover, perhaps you shouldn't be letting me come into the synagogue at all.
Yeah, yeah. So because Enid kind of implied it's almost a different kind of a offense. You have um, made yourself unholy and could contaminate others. Now they refer to Leviticus 7:20, so let's go down that rabbit hole. A person in a state of impurity eats flesh from God's sacrifices of well-being, that person shall be cut off from kin. So these are the same ones which you have to eat by the third day. And if you touch the dead body and you're in a state of impurity, and then you go eat this special holy food, you need to be cut off from kin. Okay, so what does the Women's Torah commentary? It offers a pretty long explanation of this idea. So if someone can unmute and start to read.
I can read it, Rabbi.
Thanks, Dan.
This punishment of being cut off, Hebrew karit, can be understood in a number of ways. The expression could mean that the individual should be ostracized, that is, deliberately excluded from the community. The term could also refer to divinely inflicted childlessness, a condition that in time will cut that person's bloodline from the community, a consequence that does not entail communal punishment. Jacob Milgram suggests in addition that karet could mean that a person that such a person will not be buried with ancestors and thus be denied the kind of reunification that marks a full life. Leviticus 2004, page 66. There are 18
I'll just
cases in the
pause you
Torah.
there. Jacob Milgram was like one of the great scholars of like the book of Leviticus. He did he wrote a 3-book series about Leviticus. We read excerpts from that when I was in rabbinical school. So definitely kind of from the very academic side, not the rabbinic side of the analysis. So he'll be doing things like looking at archaeological evidence and practices from neighboring religions and even modern village practices to kind of understand what this might mean. Okay, so please continue.
There are 18 cases in the Torah that prescribe karet. See Milgram, page 65. The verb form of the root kuf resh tav also appears as the term for making a covenant, such as when God makes a covenant with Abram. The Brit in Genesis 15:18.
Yeah. And there is, the way you would write is you would cut into stone. So you would cut a covenant. That's like, you didn't have papyrus or anything, or even animal skins to write on. If you made a contract, you would actually have to make a mark in stone to cover that. So, all right, so kind of what do you take from all of this? So what is going on about being cut off from kin? Yeah,
I just want to ask you, is that where the expression, well, it's not marked in stone, or it's, you can change your mind. It's not written in stone.
Yeah, perhaps. Hi, Abra, welcome. I'll put in the chat the source sheet that I'm showing. Yeah, so I think kind of my take from all of this is that it's a big deal, like exactly what it meant, whether it was something in the afterlife, whether it was actual exile, whether it was some kind of curse on fertility. It's a pretty big penalty, I would say. And then our last reading for this section, so I want to leave us time to talk about the third part. So, and then here's just another comment that this would also apply to women, not only to men. So, whatever it's talking about, it was considered a pretty big penalty for doing this. So we talked again about, so what are kind of the spiritual implications of being holy then? we first implication was about being properly boundaried. What about the spiritual implications? Is there, according to the Torah, a spiritual aspect to being holy? Yeah, Enid.
Could you explain the question a little bit more? I'm not quite sure I understand your question.
Yeah, so here we're talking about um, if you're eating the sacrifice, you've profaned something that was sacred and you've gotten cut off.
Okay.
So is there some, and like our first practices were, don't think about sex. Don't get yourself in a situation where you might be tempted to to participate in the sex cult of the Canaanites. And then this other thing is about eating kind of holy food. So, is there something about kind of this eating holy food that might tell us something about? So, what I'm trying to do is what does it mean to be holy, right? You shall be holy. What
Okay.
does eating the sacred food have to do with holiness, according to here? And maybe it's a little esoteric, which is why people aren't sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Rabbi, I think the Kabbalah talks a lot about I know there's like according to the Zohar, there's real spiritual consequences of like not mixing meat and dairy or when you mix meat and
Mhm.
dairy.
Yeah.
Right there. The Zohar talks about meat and dairy of being foods with like very different energy sources, and you just
Mhm.
shouldn't be combining them
Yeah.
inside of you.
So,
Thanks,
Rabbi
Dan.
Greg, abstracting things a little bit, one thing that comes to mind, going back to what we talked about at the beginning of our session, God has given us a path that we can become holy. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of hints here that you can cut off your own path. If you mess up badly enough, that door could be shut to you.
Yeah.
So keep the door open.
Hmm. Thank you, Neil.
And maybe build some fences.
Yeah.
And maybe build some fences, right? Because if you walk too close to
When
the edge of the cliff, you're cut off. Boom. That's it. Anita.
when you think about, oh, wow, my screen just changed. I don't know what I did. When you think about the whole context, it's more than just obeying the law. You can obey every single law and still be a really bad person. You can be bad in your heart. There can be ways you try to get around the law.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and we all know those people. Sometimes we're those people. But to be holy means embracing the laws or the instructions in a way. And I think this goes back to what you were saying, Rabbi, and what Ina was saying. I think that you embrace these laws in a way that brings out the desire in you to be close to God or to carry out a good life. You embrace these rules with joy and with the understanding that it's a personal journey within a community who've adopted these rules, and that the motivation behind it is just as important as the actions that are attached to it.
Yeah, there's something a little extra about being holy. And I
Mm.
also want to punctuate, Dan's point a little bit that in the Jewish mystical traditions, there are very spiritual, energetic
Mhm.
consequences. And that's not an area that I kind of delve in very much, but I did really want to just at least touch on that there's a whole wealth of teachings around this. And if you're into that kind of thing, and I don't say that like dismissively, but I mean, I really mean that like there's a very fruitful realm of study that and practice that many Jewish people kind of engage in around this, around the spiritual. Um, Enid, would it be okay if we just hold your comment? Because I want to get to our third um, idea. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am the eternal. I could teach a whole class about this. I mean, it is just so interesting to me. I think it is so deep. It can be a little bit mystifying a bit. But before we look at the commentators, I just want to know, what are things you notice about this? What speaks to you about this? This is one of the 613 mitzvot. Very clear prohibition about insulting the deaf or putting a stumbling block before the blind.
Taking advantage of someone's disability
Yeah,
in a hurtful way.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the most plain reading from this is, if you do these things, you're kind of a jerk. That's really just not okay, to do this. But there's some greater depth we can get into as well. Rashi, who's teaching from Sifra Kedoshim, from the Midrash. Could someone unmute and read the English, please?
I'll read it. Thou shalt not put a stumbling block before the blind. This implies, give not a person who is blind in a matter and advice which is improper for him. Do not say to him, sell your field and buy from the proceeds of the sale an ass, the fact being that you were endeavoring to circumvent him and to take the field from him.
Okay, so what kind of example is this? Yeah, Enid.
Well, I think you need, I don't want to say, I was involved in, amongst other things, in the educational world, and there was a Bruno Benelheim who was in the 1960s in Chicago, and he used this example that there was an orthogenic school where were working with these children who were disabled in one way or another. I don't know about physically, but emotionally. Anyway, they were not.
Enid, I'm just a little sensitive on time, so if you could maybe tighten up your comment.
So the
please.
point was, he took this little boy, and they could, when they plugged the little boy in, he could operate into an outlet. Now that was imaginary. So the point is that I think that we need to meet people where they are and not put obstacles in their way, but you have to meet someone where they are.
Thank you, Enid. Martin.
I read this as that the person who's giving advice has a selfish intent.
Yeah. Yeah. They have information that the other person is blind to and is taking advantage of them. Thank you. Abra.
I think it has implications for more than people. I think it has implications for telling the truth.
Yeah.
So in business dealings, in day-to-day life, do not put stumbling blocks before people you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Be truthful.
Love that. Absolutely. I think that's part of this.
And bullying comes into this.
Yeah, absolutely. Power imbalances. I mean, there's a lot of implications from this not putting a stumbling block before the blind.
Going beyond the law it's not enough just to not put things, stumbling blocks in front of the blind. We need to go that extra. In today's world, we choose to go that extra mile to make the world more user friendly for anyone who has any kind of deficit or challenge or is different, so that we can all be on a fair playing field.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and there's a commentator at the end where there's a very much of a plain meaning, how we should treat people who have some sort of disability, blindness, deafness, learning disabilities, however. And there's these kind of metaphorical putting stumbling blocks before the blind, like in business dealings. Um, Sforno says, it's also don't cause someone distress that may undermine their dignity, self-image. Um, Here around like insulting the deaf, you're cursing them and they don't even know it. They don't know. So this could be talking behind someone's back, ruining someone's relationship behind their back. This is just, again, you're really a jerk to do this to a deaf person, to kind of make fun of them in front of other people so they don't even know what the joke is. They don't even know what's happening. It's just really reprehensible um, behavior, but also, if we take it on, as I say, on the metaphorical level, we could really hurt someone's self-image, hurt their reputation. So let's look at Melissa Yesharim. This is The Path of the Just, one of the great Jewish Musar books of all time. It's not an easy read, but it is so incredibly deep on personal conduct. So let's see what they have to say regarding misleading advice. Anyone who hasn't read or talked as much like to read this? For someone who has talked more, just unmute and sing out.
I can read it, Rabbi.
Thank you, Dan.
Giving misleading advice. Regarding misleading advice, we were taught in Torah Kohanim 2:14, you shall not put a stumbling block before the blind, Vayikra 19:14, i.e., before one who is blind in some matter. For example, if one asks you, is the daughter of so-and-so permitted to marry a Kohen? Do not answer him, she is permitted when she is not. If he consulted you for advice, do not give him an advice which is not suitable to him. Do not say to him, sell your house and buy a donkey, while in truth you intend to circumvent him and buy it from him. Perhaps you will say, I'm giving him a good advice. This is a hidden matter given over to thought. Thus the verse warns, you shall fear your God who knows your thoughts.
Wow.
Yeah, so let's focus on that last part. That kind of almost brought me little chills. You could say, oh no, I was giving him good advice. I just was mistaken. I really thought that it was a good idea to buy the donkey. And then I was doing him a favor, so he had the money to buy the donkey by buying the land from him. But Martin,
Let's just go back to what I said earlier about you have to know your own moral compass. And, and if you,
think there's
you
Your
have
own
to look at this
limitations.
metaphorically, don't lie to yourself.
yeah.
How many times do people, maybe they're asked for advice or they're asked a question, they really don't know the answer, but they don't want to look like they don't know something. And so they give bad advice or false instructions, just not even knowing that they're giving bad advice, but because they're more interested in their own well-being or their own reputation than they are the person they're supposedly trying to help.
Yeah,
I see that a lot in academia
sure
when people won't
thing.
admit what they don't know.
But let's see, how might this apply even to those people? Because it's going on a sentence which I had sort of overlooked a little bit. You shall fear your God. Don't put a stumbling block. You shall fear your God. You should fear your God. So why, we may or may not literally believe that there's a God and that there's rewards and punishments, but this is This is what I think of as kind of the Santa Claus model of the divine, right? You may lie to yourself, but you're not going to lie to the divine. You may have the most convincing argument in the world that you didn't do anything wrong, but the truth is the truth. And that something higher knows what you're about.
You
You
know,
know, oh, go ahead.
if you believe in an order to the universe, when you lie or deceit or be deceitful, you're destroying the order of the universe. So even if you don't believe that God's doing everything, there's still an order to the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Abra. And I'll comment and then we'll get to Enid. Um, yeah, for me, this gave me chills a little bit because I don't believe in the reward and punishment, but it's almost like I don't want to be caught out on a lie to the divine. That's just embarrassing, almost shameful. It's like, well, I'm kind of better than that. It reminds me of some of the best advice I got. And I did this really crappy job on a paper in college. And guy was like, look, we just gave you an award for being a top student and you handed in this terrible paper. You can do better than that. And I was embarrassed because he was right. And I could have done, and it was an embarrassing paper. And so, if it's a reminder that we have an opportunity to hold ourselves to a higher standard. Enid.
I love the expression fear of God and that whole word awe and so on.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of in the Kabbalistic orientation, mysticism, and energy. And the way I see this is the fear is a certain kind of fear. It and somewhat piggybacking on Abra because it shifts things and it ends up coming back to the individual themselves.
Mm.
So there is a fear of not necessarily punishment in the way we think of punishment, but there's a shift and you're going to
Yeah,
feel it. And it's
yeah.
out of your control.
Mhm.
Out of my control if I see the universe as having some kind of interaction with me.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we are about out of time, and that's a great place to end. But I would say the third aspect of holiness that we've just been looking at. Hey, Dave, you just caught us at the very end. We're just wrapping up. But the third piece is personal conduct. Is that if we really want to be holy, we need to, I think Anita said this earlier. It's not just like don't do the really bad things, but try to go out of your way to do good things. And that isn't explicitly from this text, but I think it's an
No.
implication, especially with the idea that something higher knows what's going on and that your best self knows the right thing to do. And maybe the first step is don't do the really wrong things.
So what
Don't,
one last thought is, and another rabbi was giving a class on what is the meaning of evil, and his definition was evil is the opposite of holy.
hmm,
So
And
it's not good versus evil, it's holy versus evil.
hmm,
good versus bad, holy versus evil.
interesting.
And I think there might be some proof text in what we were just reading that it was talking about do not be holy, be evil.
Hmm.
Do not be evil, be holy.
Well, I think we shall end on that note, Allison. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I enjoyed having so many of you from different parts of my Jewish communities all together in conversation today. We will be here next week for another Torah Saturday, and I look forward to seeing you then.
Have a good week.